Kansas City has recently put forth a new ordinance that would impact our zoning and development code. There's been a lot of confusion about what our current law allows for with infill development and how Ordinance 190506 would impact our neighborhoods. I'm here to provide more details about the law and how this ordinance would impact our neighborhoods. The proposed ordinance is an effort to allow people to build homes on tiny lots throughout the entire city. Before we talk about why many people are concerned about the impacts of the proposed ordinance, we need to clarify some words to make sure we're all talking about the same thing. The first thing we need to understand is the difference between a lot and a parcel. With our first example, we're going to go down to the South Kansas City near the Boone Hills neighborhood. I'm sure when many of you hear the word lot, you think of these, where we see a nice outline of everyone's home and their yard. But what we're looking at here with these blue lines are really the parcels. As I add in the lot lines, I want you to especially pay attention to this area. So now we have these red lines, which show the lot lines. You can see there are some areas where the parcel lines and the lot lines match up perfectly, but in that one area I asked you to pay attention to, you can see that there are multiple small lots that make up those individual parcels. Here's another example up in Pendleton Heights. First looking at the parcels, and now adding in the lot lines. So just from these two examples, I think you can begin to see how the lots don't necessarily correspond to how houses were built. Now let's look at some historic maps. There's an assumption going around that if an area was platted with 25-foot lots, that means that there used to be one house on each of those 25-foot lots. But that is just not true. This map is from 1909 and shows the neighborhood development up in the northeast, specifically in the North Indian Mound neighborhood. The outlines you're seeing around each home again show the parcels. These numbers here correspond to the lots. Each of these lots is 25 feet wide, but as you can see, the homes were not built on one 25-foot lot. Let's look at this home specifically. This home is the south 5 feet of Lot 9 and all of Lot 10. Making a 30-foot wide parcel. Looking at this block, we can see that type of parcel size is fairly consistent with the neighborhood. And over on the right, we even have parcels that are 50 feet wide, consisting of two 25-foot lots. Here is another historic map of that same block. This one is from 1963. And this map, they don't even show the lots because the parcels are far more relevant than the lots. We can see that there are 4 houses that were built on the 25-foot lots, but overall homes were built on parcels that were 30 feet wide or larger. Here is that same block on our current parcel viewer. This is the house that we looked at on that first historic map that sat on the south 5 feet of Lot 9 and all of Lot 10. As we add in the lot lines, you get a better picture of how the lot lines and the parcels don't correspond on this block. This is not a unique situation to the Indian Mound neighborhood. We see this in many of the historic neighborhoods throughout Kansas City. Having a historic neighborhood platted with 25-foot lots does not in any way indicate how that neighborhood was originally developed. So now that we all have a good understanding of what a lot is versus a parcel, let's start to get into some of the details about lots and what you can build on them. First thing, we have legal lots and we have illegal lots. Pretty self-explanatory. You can't get a building permit if you have an illegal lot. Now there are 2 types of legal lots. We have conforming lots and non-conforming lots. Conforming lots meet the lot area and lot width requirements of their zoning district, whereas non-conforming lots don't. Let's go into some more detail on non-conforming lots, as this is the crux of the issue. We're going to be looking at the sections of our current zoning and development code specific to non-conforming lots. First is a description of a non-conforming lot, and then it goes into what you can do with a non-conforming lot. This first point states that you can build a house on a non-conforming lot, but there are some restrictions. This next point says that if you own multiple non-conforming lots that are touching each other, those lots are going to be consolidated, and you can't split those lots back out in a way where they don't comply with our zoning and development code. This is where people get hung up and think that our current code is promoting large suburban lots. But wait, there's more to this provision. This next section allows for those consolidated lots to be split back out so long as they meet 2 requirements. First, that it's compatible with infill development of that neighborhood, and second, that the lot has to be at least 30 feet wide. If you think back, to those historic maps that we were just looking at, this all makes a lot of sense. Many cities around Kansas City, as well as other large metropolitan areas like Minneapolis, Austin, and Memphis, all have this lot consolidation provision. And unlike Kansas City, many of them don't allow those lots to be split back out into lots as small as 30 feet wide. Let's look at a few examples about how our current code works. In this first example, we're in the West Side neighborhood, and outlined in yellow is a single 25-foot lot. This lot is owned by somebody different than the two houses on either side of it. If the owner of this lot wanted to build a house, under our current law, they could, even though this area is zoned R6 and requires a 50-foot wide lot. Now let's look more at how the lot consolidation portion of our current code works. We're going back to the historic Northeast into the Pendleton Heights neighborhood. We're looking at these 6 lots here, which are all owned by the same person. Under our current code, with the lot consolidation provision, this developer could build 5 houses on 30-foot wide lots by going through a simple administrative lot split procedure, even though this area is zoned R6, which requires a 50-foot wide lot. As we look around this block, we can see there are some homes that are built on 25-foot lots, but again, overall, the homes are on much larger parcels of 30 feet or more. Now that we've looked thoroughly at what our current code allows for, let's look at what Ordinance 190506 would do. The proposed ordinance would strike out all of the lot consolidation portion. Without the lot consolidation portion of our code, any lot that was ever platted in the history of Kansas City could be built on. There would be no way for neighborhoods to provide input on that development and no way to stop that development. This proposed ordinance undermines zoning standards. Neighborhoods were an active participant in their zoning back in 2011, with many neighborhoods picking their zoning district block by block. The non-conforming lot section of our code serves a purpose to place reasonable limits on nonconformities that have the potential to adversely affect surrounding properties. Let's look at how Ordinance 190506 could negatively impact our neighborhoods. So let's look at a few examples about how this ordinance works. We're in the Hyde Park neighborhood, and a lot of people that are supporting this ordinance are saying that it's to help infill development on vacant lots. Now when I hear vacant lot, I tend to think of abandoned lots that are not being tended to, but that's not a full picture of what vacant means. I actually have a vacant lot behind me here that's serving as that house's side yard. Under our current law, that would remain as that house's side yard, but with this ordinance, a house could be built there, and that house could be 2.5 feet away from the house behind me. The house behind me is a 0 lot line house, and those are extremely common in our historic neighborhoods. A 0 lot line house just means that the house is built on the lot line. So let's look at another situation in Hyde Park where we have some lots being used as someone's side yard. So this house over here sits on 4 25-foot lots. So I think we could all agree that if somebody wanted to build one house on these 2 25-foot lots, that would be okay. And that's allowable by our current laws now. But under this new ordinance, this side yard could be sold and 2 houses could be built on there, with the furthest house, again, being 2.5 feet away from the current house that's there. Now, a lot of times people wonder about what's the fire safety with the situation, and it's important to understand that our current fire safety regulations are established off of homes being further apart than 2.5 feet. So let's look at another way this ordinance negatively impacts neighborhoods. We're in the Waldo neighborhood now, and while these houses look like they're built very similarly on lots, there's an important difference. So the houses on this side are on 50-foot lots, and the houses behind me are on 25-foot lots. So if this ordinance passes, these homes would be at risk of being torn down so developers can put 2 houses in place of where the 1 house just was. Another important thing to note about this is that those smaller 25-foot lots have their parking requirements waived. So while all of these houses right now have garages and driveways for those cars, on these new developments, these developers wouldn't have to supply that parking, and the parking would be pushed to the street. With all the examples we've been looking at, we've only been looking at 25-foot lots. And while there are thousands of 25-foot lots all over Kansas City, from well north of the river to South Kansas City, it's important to note that lots get as small as 15 feet in Kansas City, which would only require a side setback of 1.5 feet. I'm sure you can see just from this short video that this is a nuanced issue that deserves thoughtful, intelligent, and well-researched legislation. Unfortunately, this ordinance fails to address these nuanced issues and just creates a one-size-fits-all provision that would result in numerous negative consequences. The residents of Kansas City deserve better than what this ordinance offers. The law that we currently have in place is a careful balance between the interests of developers and homeowners, and it shouldn't just be tossed to the side. Ordinance 190506 will only encourage small lots being sold for exorbitant amounts of money in trendy neighborhoods so that very expensive houses can be built. This type of infill only furthers the negative consequences of gentrification and displacement that neighborhoods need to be protected from. The West Side and many communities on the east side of the city saw some of the worst increases in property taxes compared to any other neighborhood in Kansas City. Many homeowners saw an increase of over 400%, with some homeowners seeing their side yards increase by over 4,000%. The threat of people being taxed out of their home has become a very real issue for Kansas City. If we want to do more to promote sensible infill and affordable housing in Kansas City, there are ways to do that through thoughtful legislation. Ordinance 190506 is not that. Please join me in urging our council to reject Ordinance 190506.